I've often seen summer as a slower time for anime. Usually, fall is the heavy hitter of the year. 2025 broke every preconceived notion I had, with this being the greatest summer I've ever experienced as a seasonal viewer. You had websites like My Anime List or AniList, where monstrous titles had more people add them to their lists as they aired than the biggest anime from a year ago, and to top that off, a baffling number of high ratings. Some of these aren't even sequels, they're first seasons. There's a lot to get into, so let's get started on the tier list, and at the end, I'll crown one anime as the best and one as the worst of the worst. Starting off, we have My Dress Up Darling Season 2, which happened to be a nice watch. Sure, being an ecchi means there's some lewd moments, but I really enjoy how earnest the characters are and the positive impact Marin and Gojo have on one another. When it came to the second season, I initially had some apprehension because of a misunderstanding over one of the newly added characters that negatively impacted me when I was reading the manga. Obviously, that was a mistake for allowing myself to give up on My Dress Up Darling for years until this season of the anime aired. Outside of that, I continued to appreciate Marin and Gojo having fun with their hobbies while growing closer, even if I can't relate to being invested to the point of cosplaying a character. I'll be placing My Dress Up Darling Season 2 in a B tier because it didn't connect with me the same way as the first season, despite renewing my interest in the series. I had high hopes for Water Magician heading into summer, enough so that I called it a dark horse, but really that was me just begging for an isekai that wasn't totally garbage. They didn't disappoint, doing a nice job setting up the fantasy world and then getting Rio involved. Even though he's exceptionally powerful, they don't make him overbearing to the plot. The anime lets other characters make the world bigger and have roles in pushing the story forward. Water Magician is something between Frieren and Mushoku Tensei. Obviously not to the same level of quality, but something that can tide you over until the sequels to those shows air. B tier. Time travel elements, no matter if they are to the past or future, are often unsuccessfully implemented. New Saga was a pleasant surprise in that regard. We've had similar-esque anime before that have treated the future world-ending events like an afterthought, and the main character spends more time enjoying themselves than facing their destiny. Kurt, on the other hand, immediately gets to work with the seriousness you'd expect, gathering comrades, weapons, and allies needed to overturn future horrors. Meanwhile, discovering how the demon succeeded and the past of his comrades. The major flaw of the show being that his comrades follow him with no real pushback against his choices, despite never being given a reason to be so supportive of him. My interest in New Saga falls apart the longer we spend time in the city of Karin, to the point of going from a top of C tier anime to a borderline D tier. Scooped Up by an S-ranked party was so ass. Not a single thing stands out. It's the same ex-party leader who gets jealous, demon machinations happen in the shadows, and the main character constantly degrades themselves while never listening to their party trying to uplift them. I find it so bizarre that this fantasy anime archetype loves to name the main character Lloyd as well. Scooped Up by an S-ranked party is garbage. I've seen countless other versions of the same thing. D tier. Each time I do a first impressions of a season and find a horror anime, I hope for the best but rarely see one that succeeds with visual or psychological horror. Whether it's a big title like Uzumaki or something like Terror for Mars, much is left to be desired. The Day Hikaru Died managed to deliver horror in a way where each episode felt like some form of torture I was subjecting myself to, visually and emotionally. Anyone who can binge this show in one sitting needs to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I've often seen a massive problem the genre faces in maintaining fear throughout. If the cause of terror is shown too early, the normalcy of it takes away from the fear. The longer the psychological aspect is dragged on without character development or remains predictable, the less impact it has on us. Here, from the moment of Hikaru's death and replacement by a monster is shown, it feels like we're experiencing the collapse of Yoshiki's reality alongside him. What once was the norm, hanging out with a close friend, gives way to a nightmarish hellscape the longer the monster wearing Hikaru's face is away from the mountain. I'm morbidly happy with The Day Hikaru Died, which makes this the first A tier. Watching Tougan Anki wasn't fun, it just sucks. The blood powers depicted in the anime were unbearable to look at, especially given that older anime like Deadman Wonderland and Hellsing Ultimate from over 10 years ago have more preferable blood powers to look at. When I considered subjecting myself to 24 episodes of a mediocre shonen with mid animation, well, I gave up. Tougan Anki was D tier. Sakamoto Days is supposed to be a comedy, yet it never seems to get me to laugh, even with how hard it leans into absurdity. When I think of anime that use this type of comedy, Gintama and One Punch Man come to mind, yet because of the follow-up to it with messaging like finding where you belong, etc., you have something better there. Sakamoto Days is just fights that don't emotionally evoke anything within me. It all comes across as cinematic fluff. Sure, not every anime needs to pose some philosophical debate or pull at your heartstrings. Still, there needs to at least be something to care for. Characters like Lou and Hisuke are introduced and carelessly discarded once a new arc starts just for a new character that awaits the same fate to be thrown at you. I don't see Sakamoto Days doing anything to improve on that, so it's at the end of the road for me and it, D tier. Since I've already flamed some big named anime, I'll lean further into the role of a villain on this since people won't like hearing Dandadan or its season 2 isn't all that impressive, or at least to the scale of popularity it has. A solid enough anime that visually impresses, yet little has been done to make the characters endearing. I don't find any sort of emotional connection with the cast outside of Momo, and I'd really hoped for a change in this season, especially in the case of Okarun. The abilities or moments that are references to other anime feel much more like weak attempts than something to actually be excited for. With Dandadan, I often see it cited that the blending of genres, the humor, and its unpredictability is what makes it so great. It's really only the animation elevating it to the level it's at. Some may see it as unfair. Even so, Gintama does all of this better while doing more emotional heavy lifting. Dandadan Season 2 suffers in the same way I've criticized Sakamoto Days for. It's too much visual fluff, so in the end, I have to say B tier for this anime, which is still quite good, but doesn't match the community census. Secrets of the Silent Witch isn't some exceptionally unique take on witches or a fantasy academy life, despite how highly it's ranked. Maybe it's better than garbage like Iceblade Sorcerer or the misfit of Demon King Academy and its copycat ilk. Though that doesn't change, I was unconvinced the community opinion matches. Actually, being honest about this anime, this came across like an Otome isekai just without the isekai. Monica is a super powerful mage that almost everyone finds endearing for her shy and clumsy yet positive attitude, which I interpreted more so as sympathy for her rather than genuine friendships. Others are enthralled by the magic of the Silent Witch, which leads into my biggest gripe. Is this or is this not a fantasy where using magic is possible? From what I'm looking at, it's just a plot device for Monica to deny assassination attempts without getting caught and not really incorporating it into the characters' daily lives. I can't see Secrets of the Silent Witch as anything other than C tier, and don't find the quote-unquote character growth of Monica to be especially convincing. There are two ways to look at Call of the Night Season 2. From a purely anime perspective, it's a continuation of more of the same Vampires in the Night aesthetic while inserting a more serious dark tone. It also does a nice job redefining and then resolving the promises the show made. The other perspective that is the one I align with as someone that's read the manga is that the creative liberty was taken to speed up the pacing of the story by leaving out most of the night school events, specifically in regard to the character Rilla. This devalued Season 2's finale by removing much of the emotional connections the main characters have with one another and sets the future of the anime behind. There's only so much that can be done in 12 episodes and would have needed more than 13 to involve Rilla. So while I'm able to rationally understand the decision made, I emotionally disagree with it. Call of the Night Season 2 ends up being B tier for me. Rascal Does Not Dream of Santa Claus is the latest installment in the Rascal Does Not Dream series, and the first time in a while we've got a TV show format of it. I have to say this was the weakest storyline thus far, and is mainly dedicated to wrapping up loose ends in the plotline. The mysterious singer Toka Kirishima only exists in this timeline, and the childhood friend Akagi gets her storyline wrapped up. You know, the character where you'd be like, I think I've seen her before? Yeah, that one. Then there were new faces and further expanding upon other characters we'd known for a while. I understand that all the new cases of puberty syndrome are meant to tie into the miniskirt Santa Claus. However, they feel rushed, so each one fixed doesn't have the same level of satisfaction we've experienced previously with, say, Kaide. And that is how the finale came across as well. I did like that Mai seemed to get more involved this time around compared to the recent movies. She's a great character who was missed in her limited screen time. Rascal Does Not Dream of Santa Claus was still an A-tier season of anime regardless. If you judge Betrothed to My Sister's Ex purely off the first episode, then this would be just another common, bland, run-of-the-mill Cinderella story knockoff. If you went a bit further, you'd find maybe not some revolutionary twist on it, but an anime worth watching. The cruel and harsh uplifting of Maria wasn't just to tell the story of an abused child gaining happiness, but carried some interesting twists for other characters. Obviously, if I spoil what those are, it makes the anime less appealing, and barely anyone's watched it anyways, so why ruin it? I'd say Betrothed to My Sister's Ex was a weak concept with good execution. C tier. I'm keeping it classy and continuing my Kaiju number 8 hate train. It still doesn't resonate with me even after watching the second season. I get that everyone loves the pseudo-military organization fighting monsters, but that can only take an anime so far. A significant portion of this season was dedicated to propping up Kaiju number 9 as a personal enemy, which I felt fell flat. It's easy enough to understand why a character would care about a friend or family member, however, from an audience point of view, it's not the same, especially if someone's meant to be so important to people. Think of someone like Ai from Oshinoko or Jiraiya from Naruto. It wasn't just the MC building a connection with them, but us. When they were taken away, it cut us deep as well. Kaiju number 8 didn't put in nearly enough effort into that kind of emotional investment. The longer I watch the anime, the more convinced I become that this is an inferior world trigger. Kaiju number 8 will be going into C tier. Over time, China has become much more proficient in the art of anime. Lord of Mysteries skillfully utilizes realistic animation better than anything I've ever really seen, while retaining the character style we've come to expect from anime. Fights, backgrounds close up and from a distance, it was all visually great. The issue with Lord of Mystery lies in its vague storytelling, which I assume is to enhance the mysticism of the anime, but I feel it makes for a story of less substance. Klein has on too many hats. He's from another world, a deity like being, and a Nighthawk of the Seer pathway. It's a little too all over the place and would have benefited from doing a bit more explaining. With that said, Lord of Mysteries is a B tier anime. Apocalypse Bringer Myhanogra has a lot of interesting ideas with a weak execution. The concept that people isekai can use mechanics from different game genres is something new that could generate cool genre clashes. Unfortunately, the story escalates rather quickly after very slow pacing without doing proper groundwork for interesting antagonists to Toka and his kingdom of Myhanogra. It's all slammed in your face at once after doing Civilization Simulator setup. Apocalypse Bringer Myhanogra ends up being C tier. Sometimes an anime just isn't made for you, and for me that was definitely the case with Gachiakuta. This type of art is really unlikable to me, and I don't just mean the CGI trash piece. I don't like things such as weird character proportions. Story-wise, I find it to be a mistake not cementing the disdain of the spherite for the viewer early on, which would also be beneficial for the ground vitriol towards the people from there. The premise of Rudo crawling up from the depths of the abyss to enact his revenge, figuring out who killed his foster father, as well as finding his birth father, was a convincing enough future of the show to keep me watching further. How the anime progressed towards those things so far doesn't get me to want to come back. I know everyone else was big on Gachiakuta, but I'm not, so I think this is the bottom of C tier. As I've become more familiar with romance anime over the years, it's been easier to notice the cliches and tropes. The fragrant flower blooms with dignity at first glance looked to be just another Romeo and Juliet story with a delinquent male lead that had hit all the generic romance points. If explained in the blandest way possible, sure, that would be the case here. Characters attend the school festival, go on a summer beach trip, as well as visit a fireworks festival. Genre staples where at least one scene's required for a romance anime. Despite having so many cliches and tropes, it never lets one overpower the narrative to take away from the romance and often reframes commonplace things. Even the supporting cast is leagues above other titles. Rintaro's mother is such a nice supportive person, and Hoshina isn't pigeonholed into being a part of a love triangle. The fragrant flower illustrates why it's important for a writer to understand their genre before using elements synonymous with it. Undoubtedly an A tier anime, and I didn't even need to mention the unparalleled beauty of the animation. You can pretty easily tell what type of anime the shy hero and the assassin princess is. However, just in case, I watched the first episode. Like I thought, fantasy harem slop that I didn't need to watch more of. D tier. With You in the Rain grabbed my attention early in the season and was something I looked forward to the point that I considered it a dark horse for the season. Fuji is a somewhat introverted character that often struggles with writer's block, and as such I found her relatable. Despite her issues, adopting and taking care of Kimi helps her find inspiration and makes time for the people that care about her. Taking care of a pet can be a lot of work, but even so, they can have a major impact on things like loneliness, giving a sense of responsibility, and personal well-being. With You in the Rain conveys that, and it's not a premise I've seen explored much before. The anime is pleasant to look at and employs what can be viewed as trivial concepts to boost the quality. Something as basic as characters wearing different outfits can be a simple way to convey the passage of time during a story. I consider this B tier. Uglymug Epicfighter starts promisingly with the idea that people isekai to a fantasy world are able to give themselves stronger powers or increase stats through their special notes section when initially isekai'd. That promising start quickly gives way to just another generic anime with an ugly main character as its unique selling point. Because Shigeru coincidentally played an important role in all the main cast's lives, plus some of the other characters in the previous world, there's this weird indebted dynamic, even when characters aren't aware of who he once was. Their relationships end up lacking natural progression. Uglymug Epicfighter is nothing but a D tier anime. I began Reborn as a Vending Machine Season 2 with an already pessimistic outlook. Boxo is a boring main character, the romance between a vending machine and Lamas was an additionally cringeworthy gimmick, and the whole Netherlord villain storyline is just not interesting. Season 2 did nothing to change that, and the further the series progressed, the less the anime even cared to keep Boxo's power remotely in check. Even if the vending transformations were nonsensical, just ask yourself how many times he received coins after using so many of his powers. When I started this anime, it was with the hopes of seeing the characters explore the stratums, the impact a main character with the restriction of being a vending machine could have on that adventure, and instead it became just another fantasy isekai slop show that hoped to succeed off gimmicks. D tier, and I will not continue watching this in the future. I tried with Watarari-Kun, and all I have to show for it is a massive headache. Maybe love triangles aren't trying to make someone irrationally angry by watching all the characters trample on each other's feelings and then be chummy like they weren't pining for the same character. These animes sure do manage to make me want to see the entire cast crushed under a Gundam space colony though. D tier. Clevatess is the thing I look for with fantasy. Magic, swords, mythical beasts, dragons, fantasy race cultures interacting, massive armies, and a big bad that could wipe out the 5 humanoid races. Not all this sword and sorcery fantasy subgenre has a twang of isekai BS that underutilizes the opportunities a fantasy setting offers. Clevatess has what you want from a fantasy main cast as well. A menagerie of characters is believably forced together to achieve a common goal, and Alicia the female MC has depth unlike the usual one-dimensional female characters we get. I'm at heart a high fantasy enjoyer and hoped this anime would be good. That it was. B tier, don't sleep on this title. Dragon Raja Season 2 is another Chinese anime that I rather enjoyed the first season of. Humans with dragon blood are taking on dragon emperors with their younglings. The second season has felt like a step back after the events of the previous season, and Lu Mingfei came across as regressing development-wise despite what the reunion with Chen implied. I guess Dragon Raja wants to perpetually use him as the idiot character that will every so often do something badass. I also found that the realism here versus Lord of Mysteries was much worse, to the point where characters and backgrounds clash. Dragon Raja Season 2 will be going into C tier, though it does still have a whole second half to the season outside of summer to redeem itself. Last on the tier list, we have Solo Camping for 2. It isn't some amazingly animated show, and despite the low community interest, it provides a good enough story to keep you watching. Gen teaches Shizuku about camping, and some romantic interest gradually builds up along the course of the anime through their shared interest. It's just a feels-good anime you can learn a little about camping from. C tier. We've now placed everything on the tier list, and when it comes to crowning the best anime for summer, it's between the Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity and the day Hikaru Died. Each exceeded my expectations and is one of the best shows I've seen in their respective genres. After weighing the pros and cons, the Fragrant Flower blooms with dignity inches slightly ahead. Accordingly, it'll be crowned the best of summer. There's a quality supporting cast which not only sets these two anime apart, but is also one of the biggest things romance constantly fails to do properly. For the worst of the worst, I'm looking at Tougan Anki and Scooped Up by an S-ranked adventure. I'll have to give it to Tougan Anki, since you'd think you could expect more from it early on because of the popularity of the manga. Instead, it slaps you with characters, gives you no time to care about anyone, and almost the whole world seems to be the anti-hero archetype. And that's that. Let me know your thoughts on the tier list. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and with that, I'm out.